to Sidelines on this Monday morning, July the 11th. Believe it or not, the month is flying by. Rob Brown here with you, along with Jimmy Hodge. Franz Beard, GatorbaitMedia.com, checking in from Gainesville, Florida with us this morning. Got a lot of fun in store for you today, people. Rodney Beard, Rodney Orr, Tider Insider, will join us in the second segment, checking in from Tuscaloosa. Always a lot going on down there as they prepare to win their 78th national championship in this millennium. And in the third segment, top of the second hour, first-time guest, Phil Savage, former executive director of the Mobile Senior Bowl, also analyst for a while on the Alabama Football Network, color man, and now currently works with the New York Jets and involved heavily with being an analyst in the NFL. We'll also talk in the fourth segment with Wes Moore, ESPN 103.7, The Buzz, and Little Rock. Get a little bit of Razorback news. There's always news from every one of these schools in the SEC and schools around the country. And guys, let's get started. What in the wide world of sports is going on here? How many times can we ask that question? But we talk about conference expansion. We talk about networks being purchased, one buying another one, trying to get a bigger market share. But we all know this. The game of college football will survive. It's great on the field. We got some stuff going on off the field. But, Franz, you make a lot of sense when you talk about it. We need to have some of these NIL deals bust so we'll show that, look, if you try to make it like pro sports, college sports will kind of be dysfunctional. But I want to get your thoughts on your daily thoughts, your one final pithy thought, and all this since this happened in the last 10 days, because there's still a lot more news to come. We got media days for the ACC, the SEC, and everybody else coming. And that's what we do. We talk about college sports every Monday through Saturday, 8 to 10 a.m. Central, 9 to 11 east of the Chattahoochee. And remember, follow us on Twitter at Sidelines_live, Facebook, Sidelines, Instagram, sidelines.live, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Okay, Franz, your thoughts? I know you have some.
Well, let's start with one obvious thought, and that is the fact that Greg Sankey is going to hold it 16 teams, and he's going to set the tone on this. And by holding it 16 teams, he's going to allow Notre Dame to get its deal from some network or some streaming service or a combination of those to remain independent. Notre Dame wants to remain independent. He's going to do his part. And he will not add Notre Dame. He will not expand until Notre Dame makes its move. And Notre Dame basically has four options. Option number one, which is the one they want, which is to remain independent. Option number two, become a full-fledged member of the ACC. And believe it or not, that's a better deal for them than to join either the SEC or the Big Ten. And would you like to know why?
Well, yeah, because I would love to see them in the SEC personally.
Well, they're going to.
Yeah, I'd like to hear why that would be a better deal for them to go to the ACC.
It's kind of like what Bobby Bowden said back in 1992 when Florida State joined the ACC. He said, it's a whole lot easier winning a national championship when you don't have to play Alabama.
And very true.
And he can go to the ACC. And here's the thing. If they join the ACC, ESPN will renegotiate that contract. And it will get them to about the $50 or $60 million a year level.
Okay.
With that, they're happy with that. They don't, they're not looking at the SEC or the Big Ten for all the money. Okay, but that's number two option. Number three option would be to join the SEC. They would do that because of the relationship with Sankey. Because if they do that, their all sports agenda gets stronger because you get softball, you get baseball, Basketball is going to be an up and coming sport. As we can tell in the SEC, basketball is really rising. Notre Dame, you don't play Duke and you don't play North Carolina, but you play Kentucky, you play Arkansas, you play Florida. You won't be playing Texas and Oklahoma, good teams. All of them. Alabama, another good one. Auburn's been right there. So it pays off. Women's basketball, Notre Dame's a power. Well, guess what? You got South Carolina and you got an LSU team that I think is going to dominate the SEC for a while now. The way Kim Mulkey is recruiting there, so it makes sense at number 3 if they do that. The fourth option will be the Big Ten, and I'll tell you why they won't. Why the Big Ten is the least desirable. It's because Kevin Warren screwed up when he torpedoed that deal for the college football playoff to expand. He really did. Then he did the alliance, and then he backstabbed his buddies there. He was telling his buddies, "Oh, everything's just fine," and he had been in negotiation with Southern Cal and with UCLA for 2 or 3 months, and he was still promoting the alliance. Well, those things don't go settle well. Swarbrick's a guy that believes in loyalty. That's why he's kept Notre Dame independent. And we got to remember, Notre Dame has remained independent. They had an opportunity to join the Big Ten in 1990, turned it down. They had an opportunity in 1999, turned it down. They've had opportunities. They have turned them down before. They'd like to turn this one down. Sankey's the one guy that's going to promote them for independence, and they like that. And that would be why the SEC would be a better option for them as far as Swarbrick's concerned. If the SEC remains at 16 teams, the SEC is going to be just fine. That's the whole thing about it. They will be just fine. The Big Ten will actually be just fine, even though they've got a serious logistic issue now. The two things that make sense for Notre Dame, and that will keep some sanity in this conference realignment deal, is to remain independent. That's their number one choice. And the number 2 choice would be to join the ACC as a full-fledged member. If they join the ACC, I promise you, they'll be up around, say, $55, $60 million a year. They will be content with that. They've been content with basically getting $15 million a year from NBC, and typically another 7 to 10 from the ACC. They've been happy with that. They'll be happy with a $50 to $60 million deal. And the one thing about it, they don't have to move their sports. They're already full-fledged members of the ACC and all the other sports, with the exception of hockey. So everything works out for them if under those 2 scenarios. Greg Sankey will allow them the opportunity to make their own decision. He's not calling to them and begging them. He's happy with what he's got, and that is going to change the landscape of this. It's going to put some sanity in here. Matt Hayes wrote about it today in Saturday Down South. Same thing. Stay at 16, and you show everybody this is the way it needs to be.
Well, I know Jimmy and I have talked about it with multiple guests here in the last week and a half. Notre Dame, the relationship between Jack Swarbrick, the AD at Notre Dame, and SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. What that means, does that necessarily say they're going to be in the SEC? Well, I think what it means is that if Notre Dame wanted to be in the SEC, there'd be a good chance that Greg Sankey might extend them an invitation. But I remember Bobby Bowden 30 years ago. I don't want to play Auburn and Alabama and LSU in the SEC West every year. I mean, that's not the easiest way to a national championship. So he went to the ACC. But over time, look at Florida State's football program now compared to what it was 30 years ago, or even 7 or 8 years ago. So, I mean, Notre Dame, being a part member of the ACC, staying as an independent? Jimmy, what do you think? I mean, I would just love to have him in the SEC, but Jimmy, what are your thoughts?
Well, Franz's point about football and Notre Dame being in the ACC is extremely valid, because that would be by far the best chance they would have to be perennial playoff contenders, because they would be at no worst the second or third best team in the league in a bad year, really. And so from a competitive standpoint, yeah, that would make Notre Dame an annual national contender. But when we talk about this Big Ten Notre Dame brouhaha, it actually goes back more than a century, because Fielding Yost, the legendary coach at Michigan from the second decade of the 20th century up to the early 30s, I believe, he won multiple national championships. And around 1930, Newt Rockne made it known that he wanted Notre Dame, and I think the school was ready to make a request to join the Big Ten. And it was Fielding Yost who single-handedly short-circuited that request. And it was because Fielding Yost didn't like Newt Rockne, and he didn't like Notre Dame. And it also, I believe, came into play here, the fact that Fielding Yost was not a Catholic. So lots of times, even petty things, trivial things, can come into decisions that can many times still have effect even a century later. And so when the Big Ten refused Notre Dame's overture, then that's when I think this feud began. And since that time, correct me, Franz, but this is probably at least the fourth time. The 1990 effort was, I don't think that was the last one. I think they made a more recent one, but whatever.
1999 as well.
Yeah. So each time, though, Notre Dame, refused the Big Ten's offer. And now France has kind of advanced the story with the way that Kevin Warren and Jim Phillips and George Kliavkoff just basically put a pin in the balloon of what Sankey, Swarbrick, and Mountain West Commissioner Craig Thompson were working on to create a 12-team playoff. And under the current setup, under the rules the committee had set, you had to have unanimous agreement for a 12-team playoff. So those three commissioners again put the kibosh to it, because they were upset about the speeding SEC freight train, which is how they were moving with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma. They were jealous that those two schools didn't express interest in joining their conference. So, this thing really got escalated at that point. So I think really Swarbrick also, because of the alliance that was created, I don't think he really cares much for Jim Phillips and George Kliavkoff either. So I think Greg Sankey is the one Power 5 conference commissioner that he totally trusts. And of course, Bob Bowlesby retired, and they have a brand new commissioner. So Sankey and Swarbrick, they're the only two guys left in this equation that you could say are part of the old guard.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Jimmy, here's the question for you. You talk about the Big Ten, and I like that's a very valid point, Franz. And I'm going to go with what Jimmy said last week in one of our conversations, that for 100 years, the Big Ten has sort of pushed back Notre Dame. I mean, if they were going to get them in the Big Ten was founded, the league, in 1896, I believe. And all this time, they haven't extended almost 130 years an invitation to Notre Dame to join. Or as Notre Dame I don't know if Notre Dame wants to. What, as far as recruiting and growing their recruiting base, I think it's not really a win there. They come into the SEC, they're going to be playing, yes, a brutal schedule. But friends, I think for recruiting purposes, day in and day out, they're going to be just out in front of more kids in the Southeast, which is where the best football players, high school football players in America are. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it, friends?
Well, it does, and they're recruiting well. Marcus Freeman has them off to a really great start. But here's the thing, he's going to have to prove that he can win. He really does have that issue there in front of him. Notre Dame, Lou Holtz recruited great when he started, but that kind of started after the national championship. And then again in 90, when they didn't win another one in 93, it's, and then he has like a 9-3 season afterwards, something like that. People lost interest. Notre Dame recruits nationally, but their success is based on their success on the field. And if they're not getting it done on the field, Lou turned over a fairly successful program to Bob Davie, and he dropped the ball. And then they went with Ty Willingham, and he dropped the ball. They've had a recent history going back to Jerry Faust. In reality, they've had two good coaches. They had Lou Holtz, who won a national championship, and they had Brian Kelly, who got to the playoff and the national championship game. I think one time, was it?
And in 2012 to the BCS championship game, and twice to the playoff.
Yeah, to the playoff. Yeah, at 3 times. They played for the national championship against Bama in 2012, and then they went to the playoff twice.
Yeah,
3 times.
Yeah. So, their success in recruiting is going to be based on their success winning on the field. Brian Kelly, who's a very, very good football coach, Brian Kelly found out that you could be really good at Notre Dame and you can't recruit great. And he's down at LSU, and he's off to a bottle rocket type of start. Question is he going to go 11-1, 12-0? That's what they're expecting him to do. They got pissed off with Coach O. They got pissed off with Coach O because all of a sudden Coach O crashed and burned after winning a national championship. These people at LSU are the same way. You're going to have to win big for them to have the success and sustain it. Alabama is sustaining its success on the field. That's why they're sustaining their success recruiting. Florida lost its recruiting edge because all of a sudden they stopped winning on the field. All comes down to that, winning.
You know what? You talked about it. Again, Notre Dame twice to the college football playoff. And in 2012, they did play Alabama. And it got everybody all giddy about the Alabama-Notre Dame matchup. But Alabama proved on the first drive they could score on every possession. It was 42-14 was the final. And you're right. They got to the national championship game. Notre Dame did. But they were not even in Alabama's zip code. They weren't even in the same galaxy, talent-wise. So, you got to win on the field. I agree with that. I think, friends and Jimmy, that you look at Notre Dame, they've got to, if they want to improve the brand, they've got to get the players that can get them into the college football playoff and win. And beat an Alabama, beat a Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, someone like that. And they haven't done it. Now Notre Dame is such a powerful brand. Marcus Freeman, everybody's all excited about him. How many games has he won as a head coach anywhere? Anybody? I don't think he's won.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's never been a head coach.
Yeah. He's been an assistant.
He's 0 though in a bowl game.
Yeah, yeah.
I give you a Marcus Freeman trivia though. Who was the leading tackler for Ohio State when they crashed and burned against Florida, the greatest team of all time. Couldn't, boy, they were just going to wipe the field in Phoenix Glendale with the Florida Gators.
Whatever.
Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman was the leading tackler. By the way, I was on an Iowa radio station, and 2 hours before the game, and they said, "What's going to happen?" I said, "If Florida wins by fewer than 20 points, I'll be shocked." And they laughed and laughed and laughed. The next day when I was on their show, they weren't laughing so much for some reason.
No.
Yeah.
They
well, friends, I find that under the current situation, and of course, you're right, Notre Dame wants most of all to be able to keep their independence. But under the current system, they haven't won a national championship since '88. And I'm just wondering if they haven't reached the point, just like Texas and Oklahoma did. Texas hasn't been able to even come close to winning the Big 12 championship in 12 years, or since the 2009 season. They're going, if we're treading or just running in place here in the Big 12, why not go to the SEC where we're going to be forced to be better? Because at least by saying we're in the SEC, we're going to be able to sell the same message as A&M. You get to play in the best conference in college football against the best players, the best teams, and you get to go to school close to home. Whereas with Notre Dame, they're a national brand. We all know that. They've been coming down south for years to recruit, but having that added selling point of being a member of the SEC and then going down into Texas, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, all the southern states, South Carolina. I mean, I think that would give them a tremendous boost to their recruiting and what they can sell, because everybody knows about Notre Dame. But you are right. They have to prove they can win under Marcus Freeman. And, we don't know what the timeline is going to be on this, because as it is, everybody's waiting on Notre Dame, and they sound like they're not in a big hurry to make a decision. But at the same time, with the addition of Texas, Oklahoma, and let's just say, for argument's sake, Notre Dame, the value of that TV contract could be well over, $1 billion to $1.5 billion annually.
The Big Ten, you're talking about with Fox, Jimmy.
The SEC would not be an SEC deal. Would not be with Fox. It would be with Disney.
I know, but it's only $350 million, and we're talking about the Big Ten. Their new TV deal with Fox, isn't it likely to be $1 billion, maybe more? And
but the $350 million deal is going to be blown up, because that was before Texas and Oklahoma joined.
That's the question I have.
Redone that one.
Fran, we're about out of time. So Fran's just let me say this. Tell us what you know about the deal. And Jimmy alluded to it, because I'm going $350 million, and we talked about it last week. That just is paltry in comparison to what the Big Ten is likely to do with Fox. And again, now you're bringing in Oklahoma and Texas, and those brands are two of the biggest in America.
You can double the deal, okay?
Okay.
And you're going to double the deal when Texas and Oklahoma join. That's how powerful it's going to be. You got to remember something. Look at people talk about the swath of markets. Well, just because you got Rutgers doesn't mean you own the New York market at all. People don't watch the Big Ten in the New York market. They don't. The Big Ten says, well, we're in Pennsylvania. Guess what? They don't own the Philadelphia market. They really don't. They own the Chicago market. Yes, they do. But you look in the SEC television market. You got Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, you got Memphis, you got New Orleans, you've got Atlanta. You know, that's a pretty good swath. And you look at then you got Orlando, you got Tampa, and Miami.
Yeah.
Holy cow. That's a pretty good market. Population-wise, Texas has 32 million. Florida has 23 million. That's 55 million people right there. Georgia has 12 million. You're talking now 67 million people. It's, you know, you're going to add Oklahoma to the list. You got Missouri there, and so on. This is a good sized TV market. You got St. Louis in the SEC market. You got Kansas City in the SEC market. If you're going to talk markets, the SEC's got the markets. So they're going to be able, you watch, they will double that deal. It will happen. And that's going to be a very, very good thing. And Sankey isn't worried that the Big Ten is going to get more money, maybe $10 million more per school up there. They still don't have the players. You know, how many good players are in Iowa? How many good players are in Nebraska? How many good players are in Wisconsin? How many good players are in Minnesota? You know, the good players are still coming to the SEC because guess what? That's where the good players are.
Yeah.
They're not in, with the exception of Ohio and some of Pennsylvania, a little bit of Michigan, there aren't that many good football players in their swath. Yeah. Now they're adding Southern California, but guess what? Those California kids, some of them, you know where they're coming? They're coming to the SEC.
Correct. So, hey, friends, man, we'll get you back on here again later in the week to keep talking about this. But you're with GatorbaitMedia.com. You're on the Buddy Martin Show every Monday through Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern on Facebook. You make a lot of great points, and you're right. If you're the coach at Auburn or Alabama, the states that border Alabama produce on average around 800 Division I players a year. That's about 25% of the national number. And that's just in the states that border you. So, yeah, it's amazing. The SEC is just going to get stronger. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with Rodney Orr, Tider Insider, talking about a school that's recruiting not just in their own state, region, but all over the country, Alabama. And we'll talk some recruiting with Rodney after these quick messages.
Kitchens and bathrooms make a home, and the design teams at Kitchens Unlimited know how to make kitchens and baths. They know it all because they have seen it all. Kitchens Unlimited has been designing and remodeling the Mid-South's kitchens and baths for over 50 years. Check out their showroom at 3550 Summer Avenue or visit them on the web at kitchensunlimited.net.
If you have a crash, dent or ding, go to G.E. Patterson and BBG for Tom Martin's Body Shop.
Come on down to Hewlett & Dunn Boot and Clothing Company, located on Historical Square in Collierville, Tennessee. Hewlett & Dunn is the second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast, stocked with Southern brands you know and trust. And a new inventory arriving all the time. Do yourself or someone you know and love a favor and visit this store. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-City exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
As an agricultural producer, no matter where you farm, minimum tillage is a primary concern each and every season. At House Industries in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, we manufacture equipment to help you maximize efficiency when planting and watering a crop. Pieces like the pulverizer, bedder roller, 3-bar do-all, and bed conditioner assist you in optimizing seedbed preparation and ultimately your bottom line. Visit HouseIndustriesInc.com to locate the dealer nearest you.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Brown back here with you. Rodney Orr jumping on the line with us right now here. Tider Insider, Tuscaloosa. They know a thing or two about winning championships, recruiting the best players. And Rodney has had a good segment there with Franz Beard, GatorbaitMedia.com. The ever ongoing issue of conference expansion. What will Notre Dame do? Well, Jimmy and I have been talking about it a lot. We'd love to see them in the SEC. It'd be fun. If they were going to be in the Big Ten, Big Ten's been around since 1896. Why hadn't they made a move? But, we'll see what happens on that. But there's a lot going on right now. A week from today in Atlanta, the first coach will be up on the podium for SEC Media Days, and that is the unofficial start, kickoff, whatever, of the college football season. I like to say it's when the football magazines come out, when you're down at the beach reading them, Lindy's, Athline, Street and Smith, Phil Steele, whatever. But Rodney, Tuscaloosa, you got the kids on camp, the recruits that you brought in for the summer sessions. You've also got some people brought in via the portal. Alabama got a big addition. Let's talk about that. Wide receivers from Louisville, and then Jermaine Burton, wide receiver from the defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs, who's come to play with Bryce Young. Alabama really right now, they're not having to recruit. They have to choose, and they choose very well. Let's talk about their choices. I'm pro-choice if you're Alabama.
Well, I think Rob, things are changing. I think they are having to recruit more than pick and choose now with the way things are going with this NIL. It's making it really difficult. The way some schools are choosing to use it. We've talked about that many, many times on your show, and I think a few more schools have picked up on that this recruiting process. I think when you look at the guys they added in the portal, you talked about it. They hit some key spots with those receivers. Jermaine Burton, Tyler Harrell, both those guys I think are going to make major contributions. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the name to really keep an ear out for at the running back position, because even though Alabama has some other good running backs, I think Jace McClellan's a potential star. Trey Sanders had a great spring. But I think Jahmyr just brings a different element. He brings this is a guy who can go 75 yards every time anytime he touches the ball. So I think all of those additions certainly are going to be helpful. And then obviously, they've got to find those two tackles. We've talked about that many, many times. On the offensive line, I think Tyler Steen at left tackle, and I think they have a lot of hope that J.C. Latham can develop into that 5-star that he was rated coming out of IMG Academy. So, you look at all those things, then you look on the defensive side, they probably got the 2 best pass rushers, maybe the 3 best in the country when you're talking about Dallas Turner, Will Anderson, of course, and then Chris Braswell. I just think that, those 3 guys are going to be very, very interesting to watch, see how they get them on the field together, this season. And a lot of experience, a lot of leadership in the back end of that defense, headed by Jordan Battle, Brian Branch. I think Brian Branch is a name. Keep an ear out for him. He's been really good his first 2 years, but I think he's getting ready to really blossom this year. And, you've got Will Reichard as a place kicker, and he's been really, really good. So I think this looks like a team with the leadership that it has, and the Heisman Trophy winner coming back, Bryce Young, that, as you head into the season, you feel really, really good about.
Well, we know Alabama's got to recruit like everybody else does, but they do. They got a process. They got a system that really, really works. But NIL, Alabama, Auburn, they're definitely way behind Texas and Texas A&M and Tennessee when it comes to NIL. And maybe it's that they think, well, we don't have to go out and do that. Kids want to come here, but you got to change that thinking. And they will. The great coaches, they adapt. They overcome all the issues that are out there. And is there a more coveted position by the NFL? And we're going to have Phil Savage on in the next segment. And he has, of course, been involved with Alabama and professional football, former director of the Senior Bowl. He's with the Jets now. the edge rusher. And Alabama has 3 of them. I mean, I wonder, honestly, guys, going forward, are we going to start seeing trades? Some of these schools out there going, we don't have one. Rodney, why is it so hard to find a pass rusher? Can you answer that?
Well, I think when you look at all the qualities that are needed, it's hard to find one with all those qualities that a Will Anderson or Dallas Turner or Chris Braswell, when you're talking about that speed, that quickness, that feel that they have, just all of the things, the size, obviously strength, all the things that they have, that they bring, the combination is just very difficult to find. And then I think also too, it's coaching it, it's developing it. And I think that's extremely important, obviously, as well. So just difficult to find those kind of guys. Everybody's looking for them. You see it when they're out recruiting, how some of these schools are looking for that next, Will Anderson, Dallas Turner type player. They're just hard to come by. And they have some good young players too, believe it or not, at that position. They have a young player by the name of Keanu Coote that I think is going to eventually has a chance to be a star, and some others. So, you got to continue to recruit them as well. They've got a guy committed, Johannes Pierre, out of Eufaula, Alabama, down there in your neck of the woods, Rob, where you have a lot of experience down there. And
I know Barber County.
Yeah, and he is listen, the word out of the Alabama football complex is that Johannes Pierre probably was the most impressive kid they've had in camp as far as an edge rusher since Will Anderson. So, he's a guy that's on the way.
Yeah. Well, Rodney, my friend Johnny Haygood from Barber County, Eufaula, Tom Mildrum, Sean Thomas, a lot of really good people down there. And Johnny and I were talking up on the Spring River, I remember last summer, just how much he really, really, so many people down there in Barber County care. Remember Courtney Upshaw played at Alabama.
Absolutely.
I mean, just one of the better players. And he just said, Courtney's just a good guy. There's stories in every town and every county. Jimmy, I'm going to throw a crazy question at you. You're about 6'8", I'm saying, if you were a kid today in 9th grade and it was time to really hone in on a position that you wanted to play in high school and college that you believe would get you the fastest ticket, you got to work hard and all that. We know that, and do your schoolwork. What position, if you were, let's say, 6'3", 250, and could run about a 4.7 in high school, would you choose?
Well, it's dependent on how much faster they could get you than 4.7.
Yeah.
If that was the case,
I'm saying in 9th grade.
You'd be looking at that pass rusher spot, I believe.
Okay.
Because this development in recent years has really put some pressure on those offensive tackles. But, Rodney, what I wanted to ask you about in regard to a subject that it's no secret I'm crazy about talking, and that is NIL. But in this last week, it appeared that Alabama was really on a roll recruiting, and it was thought that they were going to close the week really strong because their chances with, Peter Woods, everybody felt were really good, not to mention the speed rusher Jaden Wayne. And they end up going to Clemson and Miami, respectively. And when you talk about Miami, I mean, we all know about their super booster, Mr. Ruiz. And evidently, he's ratcheted up the NIL game because, they got a commitment from the number 1 rated offensive tackle in high school football also in recent days. And Miami's really on a tear. And then you don't hear this name very much, but Penn State's really been active the last week or so in the South and grabbed at least three 4-star recruits that were highly coveted. And what's going on with some of these schools out here, and what's the talk centering around with some of these schools in different areas now that are obviously ratcheting up their NIL game?
Well, I think all of that's true. There's different stories of each in each situation, I think. First of all, I think some of these guys that have been that committed to these schools that you're talking about, Penn State, what have you, I really think the Alabamas and the Georgias have been looking elsewhere. Doesn't mean some of those guys weren't on the radar, but I do think that some of the schools down here have been looking in other directions. So that's one thing to consider. And I think another thing is you talk about Jaden Wayne. Yeah, he was really highly regarded. And actually back in the early spring, there were a lot of reports that, Alabama was his favorite. I think he even said that a few times. But I don't think Alabama's really pushed hard for him over the last several weeks, to be honest with you. I think that they've moved on and that, like I said, they've got Johannes Pierre committed. They're looking at some other guys at that outside backer spot. And, but the NIL aspect of it, yeah, I think that contributed significantly to what Miami's doing right now. I think when you look at Jaden Wayne, they got a tight end out of Portland, Oregon, who Alabama really wanted badly. Riley Williams a few weeks ago had a great official visit to Alabama. All of a sudden Miami's kind of loading up like Texas A&M did last year. There's no other way to put it. They got Francis Mauigoa, who's the offensive tackle you're talking about. Could play guard, could play tackle. He's a really good player. And they continue to load up. So NIL has been a major factor. And when I say NIL, let's be clear. We're not talking about, and Rob kind of made the comment that Alabama and Auburn were way behind. I just think Alabama and Auburn and some of these other schools, probably even Georgia to some extent, are doing it a little differently. They're not going out necessarily and offering all these upfront huge mega deals, and assuring guys that they're going to get $200,000 a year if they come to the school. I know for sure Nick Saban's telling them, look, you're going to have all kinds of opportunities to earn the money. We're not offering you a deal. We're not offering you a contract to commit here. We're offering you the scholarship and everything that goes with it and the development and the opportunities you're going to have. And that includes NIL. But no, so I think it really, the approach, because long-term, Rob and Jimmy, I don't think this pay for play, these straight payments, I don't think they're going to work. I don't think it's going to. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, I don't think long-term it's going to work. And I think the issues that it's going to eventually cause are within a program who is built on those things. It's a house of cards, in my opinion. I think there is a high risk, in my opinion, that in some of these programs, you're going to see some of these high 5-star rated players. They're going to, I think the risk of them jumping ship after a year or two is pretty significant. And I think when guys start jumping ships, or when, such and such quarterback getting $7, $8, $9 million just isn't that good, I think you're going to see people say, wait a minute, now this is a lot of money that we've offered some kid that can't even play here. So I think there's a lot of potential there for this thing to fall apart. And I think schools like Alabama, Auburn, and others are kind of have the foresight right now to say, we're going to build a collective, a model that, could sustain the long run. And I think that's a big thing. Now, you mentioned Peter Woods. Let's go back to that one for just a second. He's a 5-star defensive lineman. He is a great player. He's a guy that literally had one coach say he's a more athletic Jonathan Allen. Think about that. A more athletic Jonathan Allen. He brings the qualities that Jonathan Allen brought off the field, the leadership that he brought there in the locker room, all of the things Jonathan Allen brought, okay? And he's a guy that's been a lean to Alabama, grew up an Alabama fan. His dad went to school at Alabama. His mom's from Tuscaloosa. He's got pictures of himself as a 3-year-old kid in an Alabama uniform. All of those things. He's been considered a lock. Not only considered a lock, Peter Wood said, quote, I tell everybody that I was a lock for Alabama. So this isn't speculation that he was a lock. He said it himself after he committed to Clemson. And I don't think that the NIL had anything to do with it, just my opinion. I don't know that. I don't know. I don't think Dabo used that at all. I think really what happened here is that there was a crack in the door. Maybe all the bases weren't covered, and Dabo slipped in and got him on a visit back in June. And Nick Eason, who used to be at Auburn, you're probably familiar with him, Rob.
Oh, yeah.
He did a great job of recruiting him. I mean, he just did a great job of recruiting him. And when the kid got there on the visit, the light went off for him at that moment. Now, I don't know all the behind-the-scenes stories. I'm not suggesting anyone at Alabama dropped the ball. Who knows? But I am saying that thing changed really quickly on that visit, and it just goes to show you there's no one that's really a lock. And I just think that when you have these players in your backyard like that, you have to make sure you do everything possible and they're longtime fans of Alabama or Auburn, whatever they are, and that's where they want to go or have wanted to go. You got to make sure they don't slip away.
Yeah, you can't take anybody for granted, even if they're right there in your backyard. And I just, it's not unusual, guys, for kids to leave the local high school. You know, Seth Williams went to Paul W. Bryant High School in Cottondale, went to Auburn. I don't know how that happened, but he was a good player. But you got guys like, Rashawn Evans from Auburn High School, who both parents were Auburn people. And I just think Auburn didn't recruit him the right way. It's the same thing with Reuben Foster. You know, you tell a kid when you're recruiting him, you don't make promises that you're not going to keep, but you say, we'll give you the opportunity to play the jack position or the star. We'll let you try out at quarterback, but we think your future is here, but go for it. I mean, how do you think Carlos Dansby ended up as a linebacker? Gene Chizik went to him after practice one day, said, I think you could be an all-SEC defensive back. I've coached a couple of Jim Thorpe Award winners, in my day. But I think your future, your money position for a 10-year plus NFL career is linebacker. And Carlos Dansby, Woodlawn High School in Birmingham, told him, let me think about it. The next day or maybe 2 days later, he gave linebacker a shot, and he had a 16-year, 17-year career in the NFL as a linebacker. I think the way you recruit kids has everything to do with whether you're going to get them. It doesn't matter. Man, last year, Rodney, we think about the talent in the bi-cities, Columbus, Phoenix City, Rex Castillo and Jack Patterson, our friends at WRBL News 3 on your side in Columbus. They're the sports guys down there on TV. Last year at that Auburn-Georgia State game, which really, Georgia State should have won that game. You're right. Auburn won it, and I don't know. I mean, they did, but they counted 41 players on those two rosters that they had covered during high school in their viewing area. Listen, there's talent. Barber County, Eufaula, all those little towns down there, they pride themselves on having big-time high school football. But these kids, they're going to go, and I'm with you, Rodney. This pay-for-play stuff, if you're at UAB Medical School, top of your class, guess what you're going to do when you graduate from medical school? You're going to be a bottom of the food chain resident making $45,000 or $50,000 a year, working a lot of 36-hour rotations. They're not going to pay you $8 million a year. Dr. James Andrews, I'm sure, makes more than $50,000 a year. He's probably the best orthopedic surgeon in the world. Do you think he started out of medical school making like what he makes now? Hell no, he didn't.
Rob, think about this. Put this into perspective.
Yeah.
Some of these kids are going to be making more than their position coach.
Exactly. See, Dr. Andrews learned under Dr. Houston. I mean, he didn't go in to be a surgeon for the money. I mean, you be careful of doing things just for the money. Jimmy?
Well, I think everybody's going to be following how this situation turns out with the young high school quarterback at Tennessee. who committed to the Vols. He's from California. And we'll see what happens after he arrives at campus, because it's, widely speculated by multiple sources that he has been guaranteed $8 million over the first 3 years of his time in Knoxville once he gets there. That's going to be maybe the landmark example forever and ever of NIL, to see how that works out. But again, I still think NIL is going to be a consistent factor, but not in the way that it's being used right now, as Rodney describes. I heard Wake Forest basketball coach Steve Forbes back during ACC meetings a couple of months ago say that, and I think it describes it in the most efficient manner, and that is, we all felt that the original purpose for NIL was to be able to retain your best players, and using it in that manner after they had proved themselves, as Rodney has spoken about, instead of now where it's being used to get players to come to your campus to begin with and become part of your program without having proved themselves. And again, that is what defies the ultimate formula of being successful in America, proving yourself first, proving that you've earned this NIL deal and not having it given to you. I mean, you think there's some pressure on Quinn Ewers right now after what happened at Ohio State last year, and now at Texas he's driving an Aston Martin?
Yeah.
I mean, and he's played a total of 2 downs of college football leading up to this season. And in week 2, he may be the starter against Alabama with maybe 1 game of starting experience. I mean, I'm telling you what, you're really playing with fire here.
Yeah. Rodney and Jimmy, I'll tell y'all something. There's a Fortune 500 CEO that lives in Memphis, and he could certainly afford to buy whatever he wants. He drives a Ford Explorer. Okay. I mean, you got kids showing up for practice like CJ Stroud in a Bentley. How are you going to get this kid's attention? I mean, you Quinn Ewers driving an Aston Martin. Only James Bond can drive an Aston Martin, damn it. I mean, 007. Rodney, I'm going to tell you something. You were born in the afternoon, but not this afternoon. Jimmy, ditto for you too. Jimmy, I love what you just said. Hell yeah, home run. All these guys, you look at anybody. I mean, I see it with my clients. My God, people, and you can say, well, it's different these days. No, it's not. We've had dumbasses and greedy people around since the beginning of time. Money's the root of all evil. Well, if the only reason you're doing something, if the only reason you're going to medical school is to make a lot of money, you should not be a doctor. Because the doctors that I know and dentists, good people like Dr. Whit Wills, he's a dentist. Every year in January, he volunteers for 10 days to go to Haiti and do free dental care for these people down there. One night at a Curcio meeting, one of my buddies asked him about Wi-Fi, and he goes, "What Wi-Fi? They don't have Wi-Fi down there. You do things out of the, you got to prove yourself." And this, Jimmy, you're right. For anybody to say, that's exactly what's going on. Miami, it is pay for play, dude. Like what did Sherlock Holmes say one time? His assistant, Watson, he said, there's nothing more deceptive in life than an obvious clue, Rodney. How much more obvious do you need to make it? I mean, what do we need to do? I mean, they don't do that in Corpus Christi,
I tell you what they need to do. They somehow got to get this thing figured out and get a governing body and get some rules, and everybody try to play by the same thing. And that's what several of these coaches have been saying.
Yeah.
I tell you another one. It's really kind of interesting is the recruiting that Louisville's doing right now.
Yeah.
And the players they're getting, they got the number 1 running back out of the state of Texas. Maybe the number 1 back in the country, Reuben Owens. and others. So their recruiting has been interesting. So, again, it's going to be this is these things that right now that we're hearing about with NIL and all of this stuff, the transfer portal and all of these things. Somehow they're going to have to get a governing body together because it's obviously not going to be the NCAA, I feel, and they've got to get a grip on this thing.
Yeah. Well, this is what happens when you have a void in leadership. There's nobody there, and we don't need the federal government involved at all. I mean, we all remember when they were given a brothel out in Reno, Nevada, and it went broke. I mean, how can you lose? I mean, but they did. Get NIL is nothing. It is pay for play. That's all it is. I mean, when you're that especially as Jimmy alluded to, and you did, Rodney, as well. When you're this Nico Lamaliva out in California, if it's a guaranteed $8 million, this kid hasn't played the first down of football in the Southeastern Conference. He has not been hit by Will Anderson doing 23 miles an hour. I mean, good grief. What kind of
he hasn't
people
played his first down of his senior year of high school?
Exactly.
I mean, these are, but anyway, Rob,
crazy.
It is. It really is. But it is what it is right now. And so we'll see. It'll be interesting to see, how this thing all shakes out over a period of time. I think that college sports or college, football or whatever, I think I see a lot of interest waning. And look, there's going to be significant interest. Don't get me wrong. There's no question about that. But I do think that there's the spirit of the game, the spirit of college football is to me is unmatched, has been unmatched. And I've been following it for 50 years. You guys have been following it a long time as well. And the spirit of college football is different than everything else. It's different than pro sports. It's different than, the NFL and all of these things, I mean, it's just the pageantry, the spirit of it. And I think it's being threatened right now.
You know what, Rodney? And I'm not going to say the person's name, but there's a kid at an SEC school whose dad is one of the school's biggest boosters. And he's pledged a big fraternity, and he's missed several pledge events, parties on at Lake Martin because he's working. Okay. He's the grandson of a very wealthy man. The point being, that kid has a work ethic. He could, he's not going to his employer and saying, hey man, I got to get off and who my dad or granddad is. Those are the kind of people that I've got zero respect. And don't give me this whiny narrative about kids. Well, their circumstances. Hey, everybody's got it tough in life. Ain't easy out there. But forking up the money to unproven people's crazy.
What about the benefits of the scholarship, the value of an education free? I talked to a lot of these kids, interns at the TV station, WVUA here in Tuscaloosa. And, they say they're leaving school with over $100,000, $150,000 worth of loans to pay back. So it's an opportunity for free education. People snicker at that, but at the same time, look at all the benefits that come with playing it at Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, wherever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about housing, you're talking about clothing, you're talking about medical care, you're talking about everything, nutritional things that you can carry with you for the rest of your life. All of the things, and plus, they're not walking around with no money in their pocket. Okay, they're probably, a lot of these kids are walking around with probably $1,200-$1,500 a month to do with what, but they have no bills. So it's not like they don't have anything. All of that,
exactly.
I don't understand it now. NIL in its right way, in the right spirit, we've talked about that. That's great. Make your money based on your brand because you can do it because you've earned it.
Yeah, Rodney. Look,
so,
I totally agree that we ran out of time, but I totally agree with you. Make it because you earned it. Not not giving kids money. But again, the small print in those contracts is where the real story is. We need to get someone to explain and read one of these NIL contracts. Rodney, tell people how they can follow you and hear from you every day, because you're the best.
Well, I appreciate it, Rob. It's TiderInsider.com. It's only $48 a year. You can get instant access with your credit card if you prefer. There is an address there to send a check. It gives you all our premium information. We have a big update on the number one player in the state of Mississippi, Suntarian Perkins, out of Raleigh, Mississippi. Committed to Ole Miss, but Alabama's certainly recruiting him hard. But also, our All Sports Forum, it's our community of Alabama fans there. It's never really stops, Jimmy and Rob. I mean, there's always something going on TiderInsider.com.
Yeah, Rodney, they still don't worry as much as Georgia fans, do they?
Well, I don't know. I'm not. I haven't been on the Georgia boards, but I can tell you this: if Georgia fans worry more than Alabama fans, then I would hate to be moderating one of those boards.
Hey, Rodney, they're worried about the defending national championship quarterback returning as the starter, and that it will disrupt the chemistry among the backups who were all 4-stars.
That's insanity.
Hey, Rodney, listen, man, great segment, and look forward to having you back on here again next week. Let's do this.
Okay, Rob and Jimmy. You bet. You guys take care.
You do too.
Okay, Rodney.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with Phil Savage. We're going to get into some serious football talk. Hey, speaking of fan bases that are paranoid, didn't the Kinks have that song, Paranoia, Big Destroyer? Think about that. We'll be right back.
Kitchens and bathrooms make a home, and the design teams at Kitchens Unlimited know how to make kitchens and baths. They know it all because they have seen it all. Kitchens Unlimited has been designing and remodeling the Mid-South's kitchens and baths for over 50 years. Check out their showroom at 3550 Summer Avenue or visit them on the web at kitchensunlimited.net.
If you have a crash, dent or ding, go to G.E. Patterson and BB for Tom Martin's Body Shop.
Come on down to Hewlett & Dunn Boot and Clothing Company, located on Historical Square in Collierville, Tennessee. Hewlett & Dunn is the second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast, stocked with Southern brands you know and trust. And a new inventory arriving all the time. Do yourself or someone you know and love a favor and visit this store. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
As an agricultural producer, no matter where you farm, minimum tillage is a primary concern each and every season. At House Industries in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, we manufacture equipment to help you maximize efficiency when planting and watering a crop. Pieces like the pulverizer, bedder roller, 3-bar do-all, and bed conditioner assist you in optimizing seedbed preparation and ultimately your bottom line. Visit HouseIndustriesInc.com to locate the dealer nearest you.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Brown back here with you on the second hour. Sidelines Monday morning, July 9th, 2022. Or actually, July 11th. But got a lot to talk about, and going to be joined here by Phil Savage. Phil Savage, been around college football, pro football for a long time, former executive director of the Mobile Senior Bowl, analyst on the Alabama Football Network, and now with the New York Jets in the NFL. Phil, got to ask you this, though. I'm going to ask you this one question. Swanni's right, aren't they?
Yeah, Swanee is right, Rob. I hope you guys are doing well and enjoying your summer. I know this is kind of the lead-in to all the media days that'll get started here in the next couple weeks.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I wanted to talk about, and you had mentioned you'd like to talk about Norman Jetmanson's documentary, Sewanee 1899 Unrivaled. And I recommend anybody out there that if you have any doubts about how college football is going to get through all this crazy NIL transfer portal stuff, go watch this documentary. Pour yourself a big scotch and water or cold beer, watch it. It is fantastic. It is some of the best documentary work I've ever seen on the history and why we love college football. Phil, you've been around football, again, director of the Senior Bowl, part of the Alabama broadcast crew. You're in the NFL now. Why does this matter so much that we hold on to what makes college college? And again, I love pro football, but I want college to be nothing like pro sports.
Well, Norman and David Cruz did an exceptional job on the documentary and the movie called Unrivaled. Norman is a native Mobilian. That's where I'm from. We both went to Murphy High School. We connected, years later down the line when he came to me with this idea about wanting to do this film about the 1899 team. And, what's one of the things that's really fascinating about it is that there were a lot of things going on surrounding the game at that time over 100 years ago that were very controversial, just like right now. Talking about transfers, talking about the need and greed of money, and that money was a driving force behind that amazing road trip that they took. It was 5 wins in 6 days, and on the 7th day they rested. And the reason the trip was even created was because Sewanee and Vanderbilt ended up having a dispute over the gate receipts. So Luke Lee, the team manager, who was the pseudo athletic director at that time, put together this road trip saying, hey, this is a way we can make up for some of the receipts that are going to be lost from not playing Vanderbilt this year. So money was a driving force then, just like it is now. And one footnote in all of this, the starting quarterback, Warbler Wilson, was a transfer from South Carolina. So he was a backup for South Carolina, and the head coach, Billy Suter, brought him to Sewanee, and he ended up, becoming one of the legendary figures on that team.
Well, Phil, again, the history, and I said this the other day about college versus pro football. In college, people brag about how old their stadium is. In the NFL, people talk about how new their stadium is and how many $1 billion it costs to build. Again, we love pro football. You've seen both sides. Do you think there should be? I mean, and I'm not trying to say nobody should make any money off NIL or whatever, but when Nick Saban came out and made the comments that he made, and he's not the only one. We had Tommy Tuberville on the show a few months ago. He's a senator now, but he talks to coaches all over the country every day, and they're saying, look, publicly coaches are going to come out, oh, yeah, we like this and the portal, but they don't like it. I don't think they like it at all. And, you think about when, and you see in the professional leagues, when you talk to, and with the Senior Bowl, and we have Jim Nagy on the show now with us, but what they've done with the Mobile Senior Bowl in about 80 years, it's incredible. But when you talk to kids, Phil, who are playing professionally, how often do they say, man, I love getting a paycheck. This is great and all, but there's nothing like being a college football player at Alabama or Georgia or LSU or someplace like that, Auburn, whatever, for what you get. And maybe not NIL or whatever, but if you play and work your butt off for 4 or 5 years in any of those schools, all kinds of opportunities are going to come to you that other people couldn't even dream of, aren't they?
Well, there's no question. There's a ton of benefits to not only college football, but college sports in general. But, we're seeing a metamorphosis of the game taking place. We're living through it. And, I think one thing that will happen is I think over the next, 12 to 36 months, we will have a new set of rules put in place. They're going to try to manage some of these things. Right now there's just not enough rules in place to really get a handle on this for the coaches themselves. And, you mentioned I'm with the Jets. I've been there now the last 40 years. I spend most of my time on college campuses scouting college prospects for the draft. And I'd say that the most common complaint, concern that I have on a day-to-day basis is dealing with the coaches on these campuses, just saying, man, we are on the clock 365 days a year with recruiting and with the worry of who's going to come in the next day and say, coach, I want to transfer. I'm ready to get out of here. I'm not getting an opportunity here. You guys are, not taking advantage of my abilities, or I got a better offer somewhere else. And, particularly schools like a Memphis or a Tulane, Middle Tennessee, schools that are G5s, they go out and find an undiscovered gem, a 1-star, a 2-star, maybe they get lucky and get a 3-star to come on their campus. And as soon as the young man shows any potential and shows up in a game or two, then everybody's trying to get him to transfer up to a bigger division, a bigger level of competition. And, there's just a lot of moving parts to this. It's very difficult to put a team together because, okay, is the offensive lineman, the 5 starting linemen, are they getting the same NIL opportunities as the quarterback or the star, defensive end that's rushing the passer? Probably not. And I just think that it's going to take a lot of time to settle all of this out before, everyone has a really good handle on how it should be, how it should be, directed, so to speak. And it's just, again, it's going to go from the top down. It's going to be directed by the Alabamas and the Notre Dames and the USCs and the Texans, and it's going to trickle all the way down in Division II and into Division III, I think. So it's going to be something that we'll all have to get used to. But your original premise, the player that's running out of the tunnel at the University of Alabama or Auburn or Florida or LSU, they're never going to experience that kind of passion again in their football lives, because even while there's great passion in the NFL, it's just not quite the same. And unfortunately, I think some of the cold reality of pro sports will now trickle down into the college game, because when people think that kids are making a ton of money, their expectations of performance goes up. And I think that adds a layer to the college game that we really haven't had. I mean, typically you don't hear a lot of booing at college stadiums for the most part. I think we're going to hear and see a lot more of that in the future, because the coaches are making a ton of money, and obviously certain players are going to be making a lot of money as well.
Yeah. Phil, the only thing better than being a college player at Auburn or Alabama or LSU or Tennessee is going to Wenzel's Oyster House, eating some fried oysters, or Constantine's in Mobile and getting crab meat, West Indies salad. I love Mobile. I'm just trying to drop that into you, but I'm with you. And I've got a lot of friends down there I went to Auburn with, and I'm with you. We don't want to see, again, we love pro sports, and you look at the playoffs, those last 2 weekends before we got to the Super Bowl, those 2 playoff games, all the games 2 weekends in a row were the best I can remember since 50 years ago. I mean, the Dolphins winning sudden death overtime, front cover of Sports Illustrated. That's what we got to be careful of, but it is going to be dictated. And I think you are going to see fans take their anger out going, man, I'm giving up a lot, to get my season tickets, and I'm giving blood plasma. I'm doing without so I can support the school. And I got to be told that these kids, are being taken advantage of. The universities are making all this money off of them. BS. They're putting billions of dollars into these kids and these programs, and they've already got benefits. A scholarship, a 4-year scholarship at a Power 5 school in the SEC is probably worth $700,000 or $800,000. I mean, include medical care, and you've got Dr. James Andrews as your doctor. Who else has access to that? They got it pretty good, and they need to count their blessings. Jimmy?
Well, Phil, obviously right now your main job is to do everything you can to make the New York Jets as good as they can be. And I'm just fascinated by the fact that you're one of the few people in the sport of football that can say they were hired by Bill Belichick for their first position in pro football, and Nick Saban was also on that staff. I mean, future head coaches Kurt Ferentz, Pat Hill. I mean, what did you learn in your early years from Belichick and Saban as far as going out to the Senior Bowl back in those days, and how to evaluate players, what traits and intangibles to look for, and how long did it take you working in pro football to, and I know you were saying it to yourself when you first started, to get an idea of really what you were doing out there and to feel comfortable and how you were scouting players and evaluating them and then reporting to your bosses.
Yeah, Jimmy, you're going back 30 plus years.
I know.
That was the March of 1991 when I walked in the door in Berea, Ohio, and a young coach named Bill Belichick walked into the little area where I was sitting and said, "Hey, we were going to hire two guys, one for offense and one for defense, but how about if we give you $5,000 extra dollars and you just do both sides of the ball?" And I'm like, "Man, thanks, coach. I really appreciate that." Well, I was making $20,000, so I went from 20 to 25 on my first day in the NFL. I'm like, okay, I really like this. But 6 months later, I was like looking for a refund. I was like, "Hey, can I give some of this money back to get some help in here?" Because I was breaking the tapes down on both sides of the ball. Of course, I was on the coaching side of things at that time. But, you know, there were a lot of great people on that staff at that, you know, during those years from 91 to 95, which, you know, obviously there was a documentary about Cleveland 95 that came out when we moved and became the Baltimore Ravens, that, you know, surrounding that announcement and everything. You guys have seen that on NFL Network, I'm sure. But, you know, a lot of people have referred to that as the ultimate football think tank. There were not a lot of things totally in place. It was a work in progress. We learned a lot during those times, you know, in terms of how to evaluate players, what we were really looking for, what worked in the NFL, what didn't from a prospect standpoint. And, you know, I think that between myself and Ozzie Newsome and then the vast majority of our scouting staff that ended up transitioning to Baltimore, I think we were we were one of the benefactors of those 5 years of experiences, because, you know, we only had one playoff season in those 5 years. We did some good things, but it never totally came to fruition until we got to Baltimore with the Ravens, and they've had a lot of success over the years, really. And I think it goes back, you know, to those formative seasons in 96, 97, 98. And then, of course, what the Patriots have done, you know, under Coach Belichick. And then obviously when Nick Saban left, went to Michigan State, then LSU, had a short stay at the Dolphins, and then resurfaced in college football at Alabama. I mean, what they've done has been unprecedented, and I don't think it'll ever be matched again, especially in this environment that we're in now. But there are a lot of smart people, a lot of people that worked very hard, a lot of hours, some blood, some sweat, some tears going back those years. But it certainly lasted a lifetime in my football career, that's for sure.
Yeah, Phil, when you go back to those days, privately to yourself, when you watched Belichick and Saban, and you know, you just had such a rare behind the scenes ringside seat for all of this. Did you foresee the greatness that was ahead for both of those coaches back then?
You know, honestly, I think all of us were working so hard and just trying to put one foot in front of the other. And we had a ton of projects. It just seemed like there was never any time to think about the future other than just like the next day or the next couple of weeks in front of you. But I think one thing that we all recognized in both Bill and Nick was, first of all, their football intellect is at a totally different level than most everyone else. I mean, they know the game inside out. I've always said that Bill could coach any position, offense, defense, special teams, and coach it probably better than any assistant in the country. And of course, Nick, I wrote in my book, Fourth and Goal Every Day, Rick Venturi, one of our assistant coaches at that time, said that Nick was the greatest defensive back coach to ever walk the face of the planet. And I probably would agree with that. I mean, the track record speaks for itself. So the intellect was there. Secondly, the work ethic was there. I mean, these two men were dedicated to the sport, to the game, constantly trying to learn. And then the third thing to me is their adaptability. I mean, you think about what Bill learned in those 5 years in Cleveland. Then he got another chance in New England, and he didn't make a lot of the same mistakes that he made in Cleveland. Obviously, they found a quarterback, but remember, they were a run-oriented team at the beginning of the Tom Brady era. By the end of that era, they were a no-huddle, throw it all over the lot type of offense. And the same with Nick Saban. When I did the radio for the Crimson Tide Sports Network in 2009, when we went to the Rose Bowl and beat Texas, that was a run-oriented team. Their last national championship game in the last couple of years here, it's been almost like a satellite package of high-flying, air attack in terms of the up-tempo and the way they throw it all over the field. So both men have been very adaptable, and that's really what you have to do if you're going to stay in the game as long as they've been in it. And that's what's going to happen with Nick Saban and this whole NIL thing, I would suspect, is that this is all new territory, but it won't take them very long to figure out what it takes to stay on top.
Bill, here's another question for you. I like what you're saying. As a coach in the NFL, you've got a lot. In college, you got to deal with boosters as well. You got a lot you have to do that keeps you from coaching. Nick Saban looks like he still coaches a lot in practice and in everything. And people always tell you there are really two kinds of coaches that you'll see. You got the coaches that stand there from a distance and watch, and then there's the coaches that get down in the grass and they look in there and they say, what are you doing? But they'll get out there and they'll explain it to you. That Nick Saban is a great teacher. Bill Belichick's a great teacher, but it looks like a lot of coaches, when they become a head coach, all you've really done is taken away a great coordinator, and now you got an overpaid guy that's not really good at anything.
I would say that that both Coach Belichick and Coach Saban, one of the things that I marvel at, just from my own experience of going up the ladder and becoming the GM of the Browns from 2005 to 2008, one of the real struggles is that when you get in that top chair as a GM or the head coach, you get separated from what actually got you there because of all the demands and pulls in other directions. And that's something that Bill or Nick have never lost. I mean, they both firmly have their hands on the steering wheel of their football teams. And, particularly in college, because as you said, the recruiting wears out most of the head coaches, where when it's like, okay, I'm going to let the assistant coaches coach the team, or vice versa. Hey, I'm going to do all the coaching and let these guys do all the recruiting. Well, Nick does both, and he always has the energy to handle both things extraordinarily well. But I would say that that's something that both guys have never lost touch with. They enjoy practice, probably more so than the games, to be honest. They like getting out on the field. They like mixing it up with the players. I've always said that, people say, well, when do you think Nick Saban will retire? And my thing is, like, when Nick Saban loves leading his team onto the field on game day, and he loves throwing the ball in practice. I said, when he can no longer throw the ball in practice, and when he cannot lead his team onto the field, that's when I would look for him to retire, because that's when he'll say, I can't do this the way I've done it in the past, and want to continue to do it. So right now, at least the practices I've been to in the last couple of seasons, he's still throwing the ball around, And when I've gone to their games the last few years, he still leads them out onto the turf. So I don't expect that to change anytime soon.
Yeah, and you think about offensively what Alabama did to get their program. They're averaging about 14 points a game more than they did 6 years ago. And there were a lot of reasons for that, but the main reason is Nick Saban and that staff are like, we're going to do what we got to do to compete in today's world, because if not, we're going to get left behind. It's always about adapting and overcoming, and that's what the great coaches are able to do year after year. And I just think that we see this a lot around the country. A guy has a good run as a coach or as a coordinator, and they become. I mean, why didn't Will Muschamp have great success as a head coach? Why didn't I mean, Gene Chizik? He had Gus Malzahn, he had Cam Newton in 2010, but at Iowa State, and then the 2 years after Auburn won the national championship was not good at all. And Dan Mullen as a coordinator, outstanding. As a head coach, he at Mississippi State, everything he did there was gravy. I mean, compared to their history. He gets to Florida and he falls short. Any theories on that? Maybe that they're just proof that some guys are great coordinators, other are better at being head coach. Is it that simple?
No, I think it's probably runs deeper than that, because a lot of times it could be the circumstance of the ultimate job that you get. Is the president, the athletic director, the head coach, are they all on the same? Are they operating from the same sheet of music? And it's the same holds true in pro football. Ownership, coaching, scouting, it's all got to work together. And I would say that that's a common thread across not only the NFL, but also the college landscape as well. You've got to have that infrastructure in place. And, people say, well, if you win, that it's going to fall in place. Other people say, no, you got to have that in place and then you can win. I think there's probably, it just depends on the situation, the environment that you're in. Sometimes it depends on who are the assistant coaches that you're able to hire. Who are some of the scouts that you're able to hire if you're in the GM chair. So some of it is circumstantial. And, the other thing I haven't mentioned is quarterback play. I mean, the way the game is played today, both at the pro and the college level, if you don't have a bona fide quarterback, then your chances are going to be, really limited based on the style of play that's required to win in today's game. So, quarterback, leadership, and circumstance all play a factor in this. And, I know Will Muschamp, I know Kirby Smart, I know all these guys, just because I've been around for so long. And, sometimes I think that, some of the schools are just, they're football powerhouses. That's kind of their calling card. And so a lot of things spin off of that. There are other programs, other schools where it's not necessarily the calling card. I mean, I look at Kentucky right now with Mark Stoops as an example. They won 10 games a year ago. They've won 10 games a couple of times now in the last few years. To me, that's an unbelievable job to go to a basketball school and do what they're doing in football and not only win, but they're producing NFL caliber talent.
Yeah.
Across the board, a lot of different positions. I'm not necessarily talking about first rounders. I'm talking about throughout the draft and even undrafted free agents. But, to me, that kind of job that they're doing goes unrecognized to an extent compared to, the Georgias and the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States that are really dominating the scene from a win-loss standpoint, when really places like Kentucky, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, when you win 10 games at a school like that, you're doing some coaching for sure, and recruiting.
Yeah, Phil, you really took the words out of my mouth about the importance of quarterback play, because obviously at both the college and the NFL level, it's just absolutely critical to have a great player at that.
Kitchens and bathrooms make a home, and the design teams at Kitchens Unlimited know how to make kitchens and baths. They know it all because they have seen it all. Kitchens Unlimited has been designing and remodeling the Mid-South's kitchens and baths for over 50 years. Check out their showroom at 3550 Summer Avenue or visit them on the web at kitchensunlimited.net.
If you have a crash, dent or ding, go to G.E. Patterson and BB King for Tom Martin's Body Shop.
Come on down to Hewlett & Dunn Boot and Clothing Company, located on Historical Square in Collierville, Tennessee. Hewlett & Dunn is the second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast, stocked with Southern brands you know and trust. And a new inventory arriving all the time. Do yourself or someone you know and love a favor and visit this store. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
As an agricultural producer, no matter where you farm, minimum tillage is a primary concern each and every season. At House Industries in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, we manufacture equipment to help you maximize efficiency when planting and watering a crop. Pieces like the pulverizer, bedder roller, 3-bar do-all, and bed conditioner assist you in optimizing seedbed preparation and ultimately your bottom line. Visit HouseIndustriesInc.com to locate the dealer nearest you.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
Okay, Rob Brown back here with you with Jimmy Hodge, Phil Savage, coming out of the break. Just another minute or so. Phil, tell people we've run out of time. We got Wes Moore in Little Rock joining us here in just a minute, but tell people how they can follow you and keep up with what all you're doing. And we definitely want to get you back on again soon. This has been some of the most intelligent back and forth conversation, especially from you, that we've had in a long time. Okay. Phil, are you there? Hopefully you can hear us. Okay, Rob Brown back here with you. Phil, I got to tell you, some of the best conversation we've had on the show in a long time. Our football IQs are all a lot higher after this, and we want to get you back on here again very soon. Thanks to Norman Jetmanson for making this possible. But tell people how they can keep up with you, because I know you're active on Twitter and other social media formats, and you're definitely worth following. I definitely am following you now and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Phil Savage, and you can follow me there. I post mostly stuff about the Jets. And
you have reached the maximum time permitted for recording your message. If you're satisfied with the message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2.
What happened there? What is that? God bless. Okay, I ran out of time leaving a message. Okay, Rob. No, I'm not. Okay, I'm not. I'm not on that line again. God, this is just so. Okay, Rob Brown back with Jimmy Hodge. And Jimmy, great segment there with Phil Savage. I look forward to having him back on again. The great coaches, they just seem to push right on through no matter what happens, don't they?
Yeah, it's all about adapting to change. I mean, the only constant in life, no matter what field it is or what subject you're talking about, is change.
Yeah.
And if you can't go with the flow, you're going to be left behind because somebody else is going to be able to adapt to it.
Yeah, I want to say this real quick. I had a little bit of a technical difficulties. We're getting on board with this streaming, but Phil Savage, man, Facebook unrivaled. IG is Instagram is at Sawani1899. Twitter at Phil Savage. Again, yeah, thank you, Phil, for being on here with us, and look very forward to our next visit, having him back on here because you get inside the mind of someone who's been around so many great coaches and all, and that's huge. You learn so much from someone like a Phil Steele who worked. And I know everybody listening heard what Phil said. 30 years ago, he's working for the Browns, and he goes up there and he starts out making $25,000 a year, something like that. You're just kind of like, holy cow. And that's working for the Cleveland Browns. Go back 30 years ago. That's when Nick Saban was there. Bill Belichick was the head coach, and he is told, hey, we need you to do two jobs. We'll give you an extra $5,000. A few months later, he's willing to give back money to get the help. So that's great stuff. Wes Moore's on with us right now. ESPN 103.7 The Buzz over in Little Rock. Let's talk some Razorbacks. Always a lot going on over there in Fayetteville. You're on every day, but we're getting ready for football season. A week from today, SEC Media Days kick off in Atlanta, and that's kind of the unofficial start of the college football season. But we know it starts way before that, don't we?
Oh, yeah. I mean, once the baseball season ended for the Razorbacks, it was already on to Razorback football. And I got to say, because of the Razorback basketball team and the number 2 recruiting class in the country, and then all the good transfers that Musselman got in the portal, people are excited about Razorback basketball, and they're actually going overseas at the end of July. So there's a lot of excitement about the football team and the basketball team right now.
Well, you think about the recruiting class, number 1 or 2 in the country, according to what service you look at. Football wise, Razorbacks, this is year 3 under Sam Pittman. And people might be asking questions like, hey, it was what happened last year a one-hit wonder? Hell no, it wasn't. This guy and this staff are really good at what they do. I don't think they're doing anything but gonna improve. And I say that because I look at the linemen they're getting on offensive line. What about defensive linemen? That's where Arkansas, every team in the SEC or anywhere in the country, if you want to be elite, you got to have depth, 2 and 3 deep on your front 7. Is Arkansas making progress in recruiting more talent in those areas, in your opinion?
Yeah, they are, slowly but surely. And that's one of the reasons why this year they dipped back into the portal like last year and signed 3 defensive linemen. These are guys that are expected to contribute, or they wouldn't have signed them, obviously. But, one was a transfer from LSU, another one from Georgia Tech. Another was an in-state kid who kind of blew up late. Arkansas State signed him, and then when he was healthy, he was very productive at Arkansas State. And so the Razorbacks feel like he can help them at the defensive tackle spot. But you look at this signing class right now, I think they're up to 20 commitments for 2023. And that's honestly way ahead of schedule for anything we've ever seen at Arkansas. Arkansas has been the type that's, filling out their recruiting class in February, and a lot of times they were filling out that recruiting class with kids that were choosing them over, Louisiana Monroe or, just some other schools that weren't SEC schools. Maybe there were some Power 5 offers, but not SEC offers. Well, Arkansas is going out and recruiting against some of the big boys. And, last week they got a receiver, 4-star wide receiver from Tulsa. They beat both the Oklahoma schools and LSU and some big name SEC schools. And then last week they also got an offensive lineman from St. Louis, East St. Louis, Illinois, and they beat a bunch of big time programs for him. And more is expected, I was told, this week. So yeah, and defensive linemen are coming. In fact, we're going to have one of those defensive linemen on the show this afternoon, later on the Buzz. I think I got to look at the calendar. I can pull it up and let you know for sure. But Stephen Johnson will join us at 11:10 today. So he's a big time defensive tackle, 4-star that they're very excited about. So they are. You're right. Defensive tackles make a difference, or defensive linemen make a difference in the SEC. That's why the SEC has had so much success, because there are very few big, fast guys that can play the defensive line, and that's the key. You got to get some of those.
Yeah, and then you think about just in the case of Arkansas, continuity on that coaching staff. Barry Odom's back, Kendall Browse is back, Scott Fountain. They just got some guys that know what they're doing, and this is year 3. And you got KJ Jefferson, one of the more, I think, disrespected quarterbacks in the SEC. 1 interception in his last 257 throws. Jimmy, can Arkansas, with what Kendall Browse does, improve with what they have coming back, in your opinion, on what they did last year? They were close in some other games, and maybe they won some close ones that they shouldn't have won. So the record is what it is, 9-4. But I tend to think Arkansas is like a value stock, a good quality company that's down in its luck, but it's still paying a 3.5-4% dividend. I got to buy on Arkansas.
Well, this time last year, Jefferson had not been, a starter, at least for any significant length of time. So when you're in a situation when you have a player at the most important position in the sport who hasn't really been tested during the rigors of a full SEC season, you're going to have questions, even though you feel real good about him. And he really came through, I thought, in flying colors, had a great season. And in turn, the Razorbacks really came out of the gate well with the big win over Texas, and then they broke the losing streak against A&M, and it sparked them to a really nice season. And when you're talking about recruiting a lineman, I mean that's a really, really big emphasis now, because last year, for the first time I could ever remember, I'm talking top 10 programs were struggling in the offensive line, especially with those speed pass rusher, which really makes it important for your tackles to be agile. And then on the defensive side of the ball up front, most teams now are going with the 3-man front, which means that you really need depth in those positions, because when you got 5 offensive linemen lined up at the line of scrimmage, as opposed to 3 defensive linemen they're going up against, those defensive linemen are going to take a lot of wear and tear, because their responsibility is to mainly occupy as many blockers as possible, so that those linebackers are freed up to make the tackles. So I wanted to ask Wes, when Arkansas is out on the recruiting trail and they're going after linemen on both sides of the ball, it really has to carry a lot of weight if Sam Pittman's out there, or even if it's an assistant coach or coordinator out on the trail. It's got to be really important for those recruits that the head coach is a lineman, because that tells them that there is going to be an emphasis on both sides of the ball in that area.
Yeah, and Arkansas feels like they have a very good up-and-coming offensive line coach in Cody Kennedy. And you guys remember he was pretty much I'd say cherry-picked by Sam Pittman last year. He was brought in as the tight end coach, and he was seen as the offensive line coach in waiting. They thought it would be a couple years down the road, but they lost their offensive line coach to LSU, and that just shows you how much, when Sam Pittman thinks you're a good offensive line coach, the rest of the country is going to think you're a good offensive line coach. And there was no panic from Coach Pittman because he knew what he had in Cody Kennedy. Well, sure enough, now every time we talk to one of these offensive linemen that have committed or signed with Arkansas, they give a ton of credit to Cody Kennedy and just the things that, for example, the latest offensive lineman, Paris Patterson from East St. Louis, Illinois, he told us on our show he came to Razorback camp and he earned a scholarship because of what he did at the camp. And then he went to some other camps, and the scholarships are rolling in. Well, he quickly committed to Arkansas because of some of the things that Cody Kennedy was helping him with as an offensive lineman. He said that the instruction, the technique, the care, the relationship, it was something that made a huge impact on him, and he committed right away. And I said, man, you got all these other offers coming in now. What's that mean? He's like, every time one of these coaches call, I tell them to lose my number because I'm done. I'm one and done. I'm committed to Arkansas, and there's no other visits. I'm going to be a Razorback, and that's because of Sam Pittman and Cody Kennedy. But no, you're exactly right with those defensive linemen. The same thing. It helps when you have a Barry Odom been around for a third year. It's just tremendous. I told you guys last week with some of the new things they're implementing because they have so much experience now with the defensive coordinator there for the third straight year. Same defense. These guys have been in it now for 2 years, and they're looking at doing different things because they know the defense a lot better. So that, to me, and that it's the same thing with Briles. It's the first time in his career that Briles has had a second-year quarterback in his system. That's pretty crazy to think about. Now, I know Briles has moved around a lot, and quarterbacks move, and they graduate, and they get their chance, they shine, they go off to the NFL. But for Briles, for the first time to have a quarterback come back for the second year in his system, that was kind of mind-blowing for me. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun watching KJ Jefferson this season.
Yeah, Wes, the one area where I was concerned about regarding the offense last year, and I'm sure they worked a lot on it during the spring, but their short yardage conversion on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 wasn't that good. And the one game that really stood out to me was the A&M game because they really had a chance to put that game away early, relatively early. I think late third quarter, 4th and 1, they were down on maybe the A&M 17 or 18, and just wasn't a good play call. And then it really seemed to spark A&M, and it really turned the game into a close one, which I felt it shouldn't have been because I thought Arkansas was clearly better for pretty much most of the day. So have you seen or heard that there's a lot of emphasis on that, trying to get better in the short yardage situations?
No doubt. They did a lot of that in the spring. They had just segments of practice. Just that's all they did was work on short yard situations. Guys, I go back to the Ole Miss game. 2-point conversion to win the game. That's a short yardage conversion to me. And they had the right play dialed up. They just didn't. KJ Jefferson made the wrong read. If he had the tight end coming in motion for a little forward pitch. He walks into the end zone, but KJ kept it and was wanting to throw it to Traylon Burks. And they had ran basically the same exact play earlier, and he threw it to Burks, and Burks made a great catch and converted. And in his mind, I think he had already made up his mind what he was going to do, and he kept it, threw it. It was incomplete, game over. But if he just pitches it, game's over and Arkansas wins. So it's those quick decisions. It's running those plays over and over. And then, like you said, on 4th and 1, those are Arkansas is going to think they get that every time because that's what they pride themselves in, right? The offensive line, those big guys. They're going to have another big offensive line this year. They feel like they should always be able to get a foot, a yard, whenever they need to.
I think Arkansas winning that game, losing the game, obviously 52-51 at Ole Miss. I think that was the day when most people that watch college football closely realized Ole Miss and Arkansas were both going to end up with, 9 or 10 wins. That's a pivotal game. Even in a loss, Arkansas learned a lot about themselves, and they took that loss and turned it into a lot of good things. A 9-4 season at the top of the list. When you look at Arkansas, like everybody in this league, everybody wants wide receivers. They want edge rushers. You got to have running backs and all. But the tight end position, if you don't have good receivers, you can have a great tight end room and catch people totally off guard. There have been Hunter Henry, Hudson Henry, a bunch of them. Let's talk about the tight end room for Arkansas this year, because that is the missing link in a lot of schools, but they have among the best every year. Is this going to be any different in 22?
Yeah, I think keep an eye on Trey Knox. Trey was a highly recruited 4-star receiver out of Tennessee. Came to Arkansas, and he flashed his freshman year and then just did not do anything the rest of his freshman year. Sophomore year, he was a big disappointment. And they moved him to tight end last year. And he look, he was a big wide receiver, and the knock on him was he could not create any separation. They just wasn't fast enough in the SEC. Well, they moved him to tight end, and guys, even that Ole Miss game, you go back, there were so many drives, key situations that's who KJ was looking for, and he would get him, 8 yards, 9 yards, 10 yards, and move the chains. And he was very key in one of those fourth quarter drives. And it happened a little later. I can't remember which game later in the season, but he started growing literally into the position, and they focused on putting more weight on him to make him a true SEC tight end this year. I saw him a couple weeks ago at the Brandon Burlsworth camp here in Little Rock. He looked like an SEC tight end. And now all of a sudden, a guy who wasn't fast enough to be a wide receiver in the SEC, he is fast enough to be a tight end in the SEC. And I think Trey Knox is going to have a good year for Arkansas. Of course, you got Hudson Henry. Hudson came in as a big time recruit, but he hasn't lived up to it due to injuries. If Hudson can stay healthy and play through some of these injuries, I think you've got a really good 1-2 punch at tight end for Arkansas.
Yeah, and that can be enough to get into that double-digit win column, Jimmy. Don't you think? And then we got a couple more minutes before Wes has to get off to go to do his show. But, man, those tight ends, like you say, Trey Knox, I've been watching what he's been doing. Your wide receivers, nobody's as good as Treylon Burks, Jimmy. But those tight ends can help you close the gap quickly.
Well, in the Sam Pittman system, the tight ends are critical. Just look at the time he was at Georgia with Kirby Smart and, coming from the Saban tree. Tight ends are critical for the running game to be successful. And then also, if they've got the speed to make opposing secondaries be concerned about having to worry about the passing game with these tight ends, it's really a problem, because in a lot of cases, tight ends are converted linemen sometimes that they are mainly used for blocking, and maybe once in a great while they might be used in the passing game. But when you've got versatile tight ends that can block, that really presents a problem for opposing defenses when they're going up against teams like Arkansas that really focus on the physical running game. But again, though, Arkansas really, in my mind, has put together all the intangibles that you need to be successful. They obviously were last year. They're looking to continue it. And again, when you're winning, there's nothing that sells better on the recruiting trail than being a team in the SEC that is showing the elite high school recruits that they are on the cutting edge of winning big, and youngsters want to play on winning teams.
Yeah. Wes, look, what are you going to be talking about on your show today?
Well, of course, we're going to have that recruit on at 11:10, Stephen Johnson. I invite everybody to join us at 11:10 for that. Ken Duke, he is from Arkansas. plays on the Champions Tour. And yesterday had a great finish on the Champions Tour, finished tied for 5th. And we're going to catch up with the former golfer from Arkansas and just see how life on the Champions Tour is treating him. And we're going to talk a little baseball. You know, you got the draft coming up in about 6 days. And, oh, yeah, I need to tell everybody about this. Dave Jorn, former Razorback pitching coach. He was at Arkansas forever, and I think he was with the Yankees for a time. He's been a scout now for years. Well, he's got a new book that's about to be released, and Coach Jorn is going to join us today to talk about his new book.
Look, going to be great stuff. ESPN 103.7 The Buzz in Little Rock. Wes, thanks so much for your time. Look forward to having you back on next week, man. We really enjoy it.
Yeah, you guys, anytime. Y'all have a great week, and we'll be talking SEC Media Days here soon.
That's right. We'll be there. Thanks so much. All right, we have run out of time, man. The Carol Burnett, so much. We're glad we've had so much time together and all that. It is. It just flies by in 2 hours. Great show, great guests. We're here. Remember, every Monday through Saturday, 8 to 10 a.m. Central. Sidelines.live. Catch us live streaming, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We're here. We're growing. Let's thank our sponsors, Gateway Tire and Service Center. We go the distance for our customers and for the communities where we do business. Reforest, Mississippi. Plant trees on your private land, your hunting land, home, office, just anywhere. It makes things better. Reforest, Mississippi, and wherever you live. And the Boy Scouts of America, Chickasaw Council, and wherever you are, support the Boy Scouts. Get these young boys out there camping. Teach them how to grow up and be men, how to hunt and provide and fish and provide for their families. That's what the Boy Scouts will teach you. Lessons of life, okay? And if you're interested, being a sponsor, we're getting ready for Media Days. Got some really good opportunities for you. A lot of high visibility. Call us 901-606-1929. All right, Jimmy, great one. We'll be back tomorrow. And remember, go out there with the expectation of getting nothing in return. Give out of the goodness of your heart. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. And we live in the greatest country in the world, folks. That's why we'll be back tomorrow morning. Until then, have a great day. Make a lot of great things happen. We're out of here.